So, as teachers continue to find ways to manage their classroom more effectively, they use different techniques and strategies and so forth. Now, some will work day one, others may take some time to work, and others over the period of time, you may recognize that those strategies or techniques don't work at all. At least they work, but probably not for your classroom. And I often say to educators or to teachers or to lecturers or professors, use classroom management techniques that are culturally relevant. So, for example, if you are in a particular region, for example, you are in the Caribbean region, using a technique or a strategy that might work best outside of the Caribbean, but not work in the Caribbean may not be advantageous for you. So you use something that is culturally appropriate, and even though you might be in a particular region of the world, you may find that there are subcultures or pockets that do things slightly different. And you, as the educator, you have to be aware. Now, you know your subject matter like the back of your hand, you know your subject, you know your content, but managing the classroom, given the fact that those who are in your classroom may come from various cultures, different cultures as the case may be, you have to be prepared to treat with that as well. I'm Allick Delancy, a psychologist, and today we want to continue our discussion on classroom management. One of the things that I often point out to educators is to have rules in the classroom, but not just rules that you alone know, but rules that the students are aware of. So, for example, let's say you are in the early childhood education system. So, you're probably teaching 4 or 5 year olds. Do you know the rules? And definitely you'll say, yes, I know the rules. After all, I probably make the rules, I have it somewhere tucked away in a notebook. And if a student breaks the rule, I know exactly what rule they broke and I know what the consequences are. But the question is, does the child, that 4 year old or that 5 year old, is it that they are aware of the rules? Now, many times it might be that they're breaking the rules because they're really not aware of what it is until they break it and realize that they are being reprimanded for it, they're being disciplined for it. Another question, is it that you know the rules, but their parents are not aware of the rules, so that the rules are not really enforced outside of the classroom? So, for example, running in the classroom, you may have a rule for that 4 or 5 year old in that early childhood setting, education setting. No running through the in the classroom. You can run in the savannah or in the plain field, as the case may be. Now, the child may not necessarily be aware of that because it's not stuck up anywhere on the wall or probably on the whiteboard or the blackboard, as well as those rules may not actually be recited to that child or have that child recite those rules every day until they kind of get it, until they start acting appropriately where that rule is concerned. So it's so important that you are aware of the rules as well as the child is aware of the rules and the parents are aware of the rules in that setting. Now, in the primary and the secondary school setting, the same applies. I have actually interacted with some parents who are not 100% sure of the rules in the school when it comes to behavioral discipline or when it comes to how a child should behave in a positive way in the classroom or in the school. I mean, there's the general ones, no fighting in school, no use of obscene or threatening language. But when it comes to how a child addresses a student address a teacher, for example, how they go about it, whether or not they're able to walk up to that teacher and have a conversation about some behavior that they didn't like in the classroom that the teacher was involved in, how they go about it, and in a non threatening way, or if a teacher reprimands a student, what the student actually does in that situation, or even where the student should be reprimanded in the classroom, outside, or so forth. Sometimes the rules are not clear, and the teachers sometimes are not aware of the rules. So, for example, let's say a child breaches a rule such as they were eating in class, so they were drinking some water. So eating or drinking some water. What is your role in the classroom where that is concerned? Is it that the teachers are aware that, well, there's no eating and drinking except during recess time or lunchtime, or probably before the bell goes or the buzzer goes on mornings, or after school? Then you can have your drink or your meal, but you can't have it in class while classes is in session. Is the teachers, or are the teachers aware of that? Because what can happen is that a teacher may be aware of the rule, but a child may be allowed to chew gum in the classroom. But then, let's say, for example, it's a secondary school where the child or the student now goes to another class during the course of the day where that particular teacher follows the rule by saying no eating or no drinking in class. And that child is accustomed, probably in another subject, eating and drinking or chewing gum, because the rules are not necessarily enforced there. In this situation, what you will now find happening is that the child is confronted with the fact that in the classroom they should not eat or drink or even chew gum. And then the child might be, or the student or that teenager may be saying, but that don't happen in the other class. Something is wrong with you, sir, or something is wrong with you, miss. You probably harsh. You don't like me. You don't. You too aggressive. You're not flexible. You Now all of that can start happening, and sometimes students may even verbalize it to the teacher in the presence of other students, and that can be a situation that can cause a lot of conflict. So teachers need to be aware of the rules, also of the consequences, and for the age group, it should be across the board. So it should not be that one teacher is doing one thing, and when you go to another classroom, it's something completely different. Of course, we're not talking about situations where a rule might be quiet in class while the teacher is teaching. And you may say, okay, I'm quiet in class. And then you go to another class where maybe it's a class where you sing. It's a class where you practice singing, or you practice probably a debate. Then obviously that rule is not going to work, because you can't be quiet in the class where you're probably doing public speaking, or you are practicing a song or something like that. So the rules have to be clear, with no kind of challenges in understanding. So it should really be clear. Also, there should be consequences attached to the rules. So, for example, in one class, if the rules, or if the rule when it comes to having paper on the ground, having an environment that is tidy, so there's paper on the ground, do all the teachers know exactly what the rules are? Now, all teachers may say, well, yeah, in this school we keep our environment tidy, we keep it clean. But if there's a wrapper on the ground next to a student in one class, is it that if that same student is in another class and there's a wrapper or paper by the ground, the rules are the same and the consequences are the same? Take, for example, this. Let's say in one class, the wrapper or the paper is next to the student's feet. Now, regardless of if the student threw that paper on the ground themselves, or if it blew from somewhere or somebody else threw it there, is it that the rule is that the student picks up that paper and throw it in the bin? Or is it that the rule is the teacher asks who threw this paper on the ground, and then someone owns up and then comes and take it up? Or probably no one owns up and the teacher now says, okay, the person who is sitting closer to the paper, take it up and throw it in the bin. Is that the rule? Because what can happen is that if it's not clear in one setting, the teacher can say, okay, well, you're sitting next to the piece of paper, you take it up, throw it in the bin. The student may say, no, I didn't throw it on the ground, and I'm not taking it up. Now, that situation could also escalate into something confrontational. In another setting, that same student may be in a class where there's a piece of paper on the ground, But that teacher is not going to say to that student, pick up the piece of paper. That teacher might say, okay, before we leave, the person who is designated to clean the class today, you have to make sure that all the paper and so forth are picked up on the ground or from the ground and thrown into the bin, because in that particular class they cycle who cleans up the class. Maybe it's one student or two students will clean up the class, so every day somebody new will do it. Now, in that same school, if those rules for who tidies up the class or where the paper is, who picks it up, is not clear, now there's a rule, but different class have different rules. That could cause some level of conflict. So, my encouragement is to have rules, and it should be clear across the board, and everyone, all teachers should be aware of that rule or those rules. Also, the consequences. Don't make up things as you go along, because what can happen is that some students could start feeling marginalized. Some teachers may even feel like their colleagues are a little harsh or inappropriate with their disciplinary measures. So, have a unified approach to consequences or discipline for breaking or breaching a particular rule. So rules are good to have, and they should be established clearly. And sometimes what we find is that a rule that at one time made perfect sense. In some settings, it made perfect sense to not have cell phones in the classroom. But in some situations, based on the subject that is being done, it might be advantageous to actually have technology, maybe a tablet or a laptop or a cell phone in the classroom. Either each student has access to one or has one in their person so as to get through the particular subject. So, rules should be clear, and it should be modified based on the situation. But when it is modified, it should be modified across the board so that everyone knows exactly what is expected of them, teachers, students, and parents, so that conflicts can significantly be reduced in the classroom and a positive atmosphere could actually be created and sustained. So, if you find this content of value, you can like, as well as you can leave a comment in the description, and I'll get back to you. So until then, take care.